A new beginning in disguise. It was a sunny morning in Mountain View, California. The Google headquarters was bustling with the usual energy of innovation and creativity. Employees rushed between buildings, their minds alive with ideas to change the world. But this morning was different for Sundar Pichai. As the CEO of one of the largest tech companies in the world, he had become a symbol of success, intelligence, and vision. Yet he longed for something more, something that could reconnect him with the essence of his early days at Google. Sundar had started his journey at Google over a decade ago, a young engineer with big dreams and even bigger aspirations. He was driven not by fame or recognition, but by the pure love of technology and the belief that the internet could change lives for the better. But as his career grew, so did his responsibilities. Now, as the CEO, he was constantly under scrutiny. His every move was analyzed, and every decision was dissected. In the whirlwind of leadership, Sundar began to feel something he hadn't felt in years: disconnected. The idea came to him one morning as he sat in his office, looking at the faces of his team members through a video call. He missed the days when he could walk through the halls, interact with his colleagues, and hear their unfiltered opinions. But now, it seemed that everyone was more reserved around him. There was an invisible barrier between him and his employees, and he wondered, had they forgotten who he truly was? That day, Sundar decided to do something drastic, something that would allow him to experience the Google campus as his employees did. He would enter Google HQ incognito. But this wasn't just about a disguise. It was about reconnecting with the soul of the company, with the people who made Google what it was today. Sundar knew it wouldn't be easy. He couldn't just walk in with a hat and sunglasses. That would raise suspicion immediately. He needed a transformation that would allow him to blend in completely, to be one of the crowd. After much contemplation, he devised a plan. He would disguise himself as a regular employee, no different than any other person walking through the halls of Google. The next morning, Sundar slipped into his carefully crafted disguise. He wore a plain t-shirt, jeans, and sneakers. His hair was tousled, and he wore a baseball cap to cover most of his features. He wanted to look just like any other Google engineer. He even practiced his walk to avoid giving away his identity. He had to become invisible. As he entered the campus, he was nervous. It had been years since he had walked among his colleagues without a title attached to him. The security guards didn't recognize him, which was exactly what he had hoped for. Sundar smiled to himself, feeling a sense of freedom. For the first time in a long while, he wasn't Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google. He was simply Sundar, a person who loved technology and wanted to learn from his peers. The first stop was the cafeteria. Sundar hadn't eaten in the cafeteria in years, as he always had meetings during lunchtime or ordered from high-end restaurants. But today, he wanted the full experience. He walked up to the counter and ordered a simple sandwich, trying to blend in. The employee behind the counter greeted him with a friendly, "Hey, how's it going?" Sundar nodded, smiling warmly, but the employee didn't seem to recognize him. He was just another face in the crowd. As he sat down at a table, Sundar observed his surroundings. The energy was contagious. There were groups of engineers discussing the latest projects, others working together on code, and a few employees simply enjoying their lunch. There was no sense of formality here, just people doing what they loved. The carefree atmosphere reminded him of the early days of his career, when every day felt like an adventure. But as Sundar sat there, a part of him couldn't help but feel an odd sense of discomfort. People glanced at him occasionally, but no one acknowledged him beyond a brief nod. They didn't know who he was, and for the first time, he felt what it was like to be just another employee. The realization hit him hard. Despite all his achievements, despite the vast success of Google, he had lost touch with the very thing that had made him fall in love with the company in the first place: the people. His mind began to race as he reflected on his own journey. He had been so focused on leading, on making the right decisions, on expanding Google's reach, that he had forgotten the power of human connection. How had it all changed? Had his success made him distant? He couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing from his life, from his leadership. But just as Sundar was beginning to sink into his thoughts, he overheard a conversation that stopped him in his tracks. Two engineers, sitting across from him, were talking about a new project they were working on, something that could change the way people interacted with artificial intelligence. They were passionate, animated, and incredibly excited. The energy in their voices was so palpable that Sundar couldn't help but lean in a little closer. "You know what would be incredible," one of them said. "If we could create an AI that truly understands people, like not just data, but emotions. Imagine what we could do with that." Sundar smiled. The idea was brilliant, simple, yet transformative. He wanted to jump in and contribute, but he had to remember the role he was playing today. He was just a regular employee, sitting quietly, taking it all in. But the idea sparked something in him, a reminder of why he had joined Google in the first place. For the rest of the day, Sundar moved through the campus, sitting in on meetings, observing his employees in their natural element. He saw their dedication, their creativity, their passion. He listened to them talk about new projects, technological innovations, and the challenges they faced. But above all, he saw something that he had missed for so long, the genuine excitement of doing something meaningful. As the day came to an end, Sundar realized he had learned more in these few hours than he had in the last few months. The connection he had been searching for was right there, in the people who had helped build Google into what it was today. He had rediscovered the human element, the core of what made this company thrive. But there was still something he needed to confront. As Sundar walked out of the building, heading towards the parking lot, he found himself faced with an unexpected challenge. A group of employees were standing outside, chatting and laughing. As he walked past them, one of them turned and stared at him for a moment. Sundar froze. Had he been recognized? Would this be the moment his disguise was shattered? The employee walked closer and smiled. "Hey, nice cap," the person said. "Is it some kind of Google swag?" Sundar laughed nervously, his heart racing. "Yeah, just something I picked up." The employee nodded. "Well, it's cool. See you around." As Sundar walked away, he realized how easy it was to lose oneself in the pursuit of success. He had been so focused on climbing the ladder, on becoming a leader, that he had forgotten the importance of remaining grounded. But today, he had learned something invaluable. He had rediscovered the power of listening, the importance of empathy, and the beauty of being just another person in a crowd of passionate individuals. The day was coming to a close, but Sundar Pichai's journey was just beginning. The awakening of purpose. As the days went on, Sundar Pichai couldn't shake the experiences he had during his incognito visit to Google headquarters. The simple moments of connection with his employees, the candid conversations, and the raw enthusiasm they displayed had left a profound impact on him. For the first time in years, he felt the spark of excitement that had driven him to Google in the first place. The drive to innovate, to create something meaningful, and to make a difference in the world. It was a feeling that he realized had slowly faded from his daily routine as the weight of leadership and corporate responsibility took its toll. That evening, after returning home, Sundar sat in his study, reflecting on the day's events. He had spent the majority of his career climbing the corporate ladder, building a company that had transformed the way people lived and worked. Yet, somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with the very thing that made him passionate about technology, the human side of it. His interactions with employees had become more transactional, driven by the need to manage and lead rather than to collaborate and learn. The excitement he once felt walking through the halls of Google had been replaced by the constant pressure to meet expectations, to deliver results, and to keep the company growing. And in that whirlwind of responsibility, he had forgotten the true essence of innovation: people. Sundar knew that he had to make a change. He had been searching for meaning, but the answer was not found in numbers, profits, or expansions. It lay in the people, the brilliant minds and dedicated hearts who worked tirelessly to bring Google's vision to life. That realization brought with it a wave of humility and a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just the CEO of a tech giant. He was part of something much bigger. Google had always been more than just a company. It had been a community, a family of individuals who believed in the power of technology to change the world. And for Sundar, it was time to reconnect with that spirit. In the days that followed, Sundar made a conscious effort to immerse himself in the culture of Google once again. He started by attending more informal team meetings, where employees discussed new ideas and shared their thoughts without the pressure of formal presentations or executive oversight. He would sit in the back, listening intently to their discussions, offering input when appropriate, but mostly soaking in the atmosphere of creativity and innovation. It was a world where people were not afraid to challenge ideas, to speak their minds, and to dream big. And for Sundar, this was a breath of fresh air. The experience was like a reawakening, a reminder of what had drawn him to technology in the first place. One afternoon, Sundar attended a brainstorming session for a new project that aimed to leverage artificial intelligence to improve accessibility for people with disabilities. The room was filled with engineers, designers, and product managers, all passionate about the potential impact their work could have on millions of lives. As the team discussed various features and functionalities, Sundar found himself captivated by the energy in the room. He was no longer an executive sitting at the head of the table. He was a part of the creative process, just like everyone else. The ideas flowed freely, and the room buzzed with excitement as people shared their thoughts and collaborated on solutions. Sundar felt a sense of fulfillment that he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just about the technology. It was about the human connection, the shared mission to make the world a better place. As the project began to take shape, Sundar realized that this was what he had been missing. The work he had been doing as CEO had always been driven by a desire to succeed, to push Google to new heights. But now, he understood that true success wasn't about achieving milestones or increasing revenue. It was about the impact they could have on the world, the lives they could touch, and the change they could create together. It was about being a part of something bigger than himself. He had learned that leadership was not just about making decisions from the top. It was about inspiring others, listening to their ideas, and fostering an environment where everyone felt valued. But this shift in perspective wasn't easy. The challenges of leadership were still present, and Sundar had to navigate the complexities of balancing innovation with the demands of running a global company. However, as he continued to reconnect with his team and immerse himself in their work, he found that the solutions to these challenges were not as daunting as they once seemed. The more he embraced the collective wisdom of his colleagues, the more he realized that together they could overcome any obstacle. It was a powerful reminder of the strength of community and collaboration. Sundar had always believed in the power of technology to solve problems, but now he understood that it was the human element, the people behind the technology, that made it truly powerful. As weeks passed, Sundar noticed a subtle shift in the culture at Google. There was a renewed sense of energy, a spark of excitement that seemed to infuse every project, every meeting, and every conversation. Employees were more engaged, more eager to share their ideas, and more connected to the company's mission. It was as if the company had rediscovered its soul, and Sundar knew that this was just the beginning. The lessons he had learned during his incognito visit had changed him, and now he was determined to share those lessons with the rest of the company. One afternoon, as Sundar sat in his office, he received a call from one of the senior engineers. The engineer was excitedly discussing a new idea for an AI-driven feature that could revolutionize the way people interacted with their devices. As the engineer spoke, Sundar felt a sense of pride swell within him. This was what it was all about. This was the innovation that had driven Google from its inception. And Sundar realized that his role was not just to lead the company, but to help nurture and support the incredible minds that made it great. He was there to empower them, to help them realize their full potential. In that moment, Sundar knew that he had found his purpose again. The journey that had begun with a simple act of disguise had led him back to the heart of Google, to the people, to the innovation, and to the shared vision of making the world a better place. It was a reminder that no matter how far he had come or how successful he had become, he was still part of something much greater than himself. And it was this sense of belonging, of purpose, that would continue to drive him forward. The humbling realization, as the weeks passed and Sundar continued to integrate himself into the daily life of Google, he realized that his perspective on leadership had shifted profoundly. The lessons he had learned during his anonymous visit to the campus had not only helped him rediscover the essence of innovation, but had also led him to a deeper understanding of what it meant to be a leader. The more he engaged with his employees, the more he came to appreciate the importance of humility, empathy, and the willingness to listen. It was a Tuesday morning when Sundar found himself standing in front of a large conference room filled with Google's senior leadership team. The team was discussing the company's next major product launch, and there was a palpable sense of excitement in the air. As the conversation progressed, Sundar couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come since his early days at Google. He had been part of some of the most groundbreaking projects in tech history. And now, as CEO, he was at the helm of a company that was shaping the future of the digital world. But as he looked around the room, he noticed something that made him pause. The senior leadership team, comprised of some of the brightest minds in the industry, was focused solely on the technical details of the product. They were discussing metrics, timelines, and potential risks, but there was no mention of the people the product would ultimately serve. No one was talking about the impact the product would have on users' lives or how it would improve their daily experiences. It was as if the human element had been lost in the pursuit of perfection. For the first time in a long while, Sundar felt a deep sense of discomfort. The excitement of innovation, the thrill of creating something new, was still present, but it had become disconnected from the very people who were meant to benefit from it. Sundar realized that, despite his best efforts, he had fallen into the same trap he had observed in his own leadership style. He had been so focused on the big picture, on the global impact of Google, that he had lost sight of the individual, the person who would ultimately use the products and services they created. As the meeting continued, Sundar spoke up. His voice was calm, but there was a sense of urgency behind his words. He reminded the team that, while the technical aspects of the product were important, they had to keep the user at the center of their work. They needed to think about how their creations would affect people's lives, how they would solve real-world problems, and how they could make a positive difference. Sundar's words resonated deeply with the team, and the conversation shifted. They began to talk not just about the product itself, but about the people it would impact. They discussed user experience, accessibility, and the potential for their work to improve lives around the world. In that moment, Sundar realized something profound. The true power of innovation didn't lie in the technology itself, it lay in the people it served. And as a leader, his role was not just to drive the company forward, but to ensure that the human element remained at the heart of everything they did. It was a humbling realization, one that would shape his leadership style moving forward. The journey of self-discovery had taken Sundar down an unexpected path. What began as a simple desire to reconnect with his employees had led him to a deeper understanding of his own purpose. He had learned that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about listening, learning, and empowering others. It was about staying grounded in the values that had brought him to Google in the first place: innovation, empathy, and a commitment to making the world a better place. As Sundar left the meeting that day, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but he was ready to face the challenges with a new perspective, one that focused not just on the technology, but on the people behind it. And so, Sundar Pichai's journey continued, not as the CEO of a tech giant, but as a leader who had rediscovered the true meaning of innovation, the power of human connection. A shift in leadership. As the days stretched into weeks, Sundar Pichai's realization about the importance of human connection and empathy within leadership continued to shape his approach at Google. His time spent walking among his employees, experiencing the everyday hustle and bustle of the campus in disguise, had opened his eyes to the raw, unfiltered passion of the people who worked alongside him. These were not just brilliant minds. They were individuals driven by a shared sense of purpose, a desire to make a meaningful impact in the world. And Sundar, the CEO, had to ensure that this sense of purpose remained the guiding force in everything they did. But as much as he felt reinvigorated by this new perspective, he also realized that shifting the culture of an organization as large and complex as Google was no simple task. It wasn't just about reconnecting with the employees, but about embedding these values, empathy, collaboration, and the relentless pursuit of bettering lives, into the very core of the company's operations. This was not going to be an overnight transformation. It was going to take time, patience, and above all, a commitment from the top down. Sundar knew that, as the leader, he would need to lead by example, constantly reminding himself and others of the importance of staying grounded, staying connected, and focusing on the bigger picture. In the months that followed, Sundar took it upon himself to restructure some of the ways Google operated. He worked closely with senior leadership to foster an environment where innovation was encouraged, but so was collaboration. He wanted to ensure that teams were not siloed, that communication flowed freely across all departments, and that no idea, no matter how small or unconventional, was overlooked. He began holding more open forums with employees at all levels, where they could share their thoughts, frustrations, and ideas with him directly. These forums were not just about getting feedback. They were about listening, truly listening, to the people who made Google the company it was. Sundar made it clear that he was not just a figurehead or a decision-maker sitting at the top of a hierarchical structure. He was a partner, a collaborator, and a facilitator who believed in the power of collective wisdom. It wasn't always easy, of course. Sundar encountered resistance at times, especially from long-standing members of the company who were accustomed to the traditional ways of doing things. Some felt that the shift in focus towards empathy and human connection might dilute the company's drive for performance and growth. Others were concerned about the implications of spending so much time on team dynamics and morale when there were tangible targets to hit. But Sundar was steadfast. He knew that a company could not thrive on innovation alone. It needed to thrive on the strength of its people. And to foster that strength, Google had to become a place where employees felt empowered, valued, and heard. One of the most significant changes Sundar introduced was a new internal initiative designed to celebrate failures as much as successes. In the tech world, failure often carries a stigma, a sense of shame that can deter employees from taking risks and pushing the boundaries of innovation. Sundar wanted to change that mindset. He launched the Fail Forward program, which aimed to create a safe space for employees to share their failures, learn from them, and grow stronger as a result. This was a radical shift in a culture that had traditionally celebrated success but had been less forgiving of missteps. Sundar knew that true innovation came not from avoiding failure, but from embracing it, learning from it, and using it as a stepping stone toward greater success. At first, the response to the Fail Forward initiative was mixed. Some employees embraced the idea wholeheartedly, eager to share their stories and gain insights from others. Others, however, were more hesitant, still wary of how such openness would affect their professional standing. But as time went on, Sundar began to see the ripple effects of this shift in mindset. More employees were taking risks, experimenting with new ideas, and venturing into uncharted territories. They no longer feared failure, but saw it as a valuable part of the learning process. And with that, a culture of experimentation and creativity began to take root across the company. Despite these positive changes, Sundar knew that the path to true transformation was long. As Google's CEO, he was the face of the company, the one who had to lead by example, and he understood that this would require a constant reevaluation of his own leadership style. He could not afford to become complacent or take for granted the progress that had been made. He had to continuously check himself, always asking, Was he truly fostering the environment he envisioned? Was he truly listening to his employees? Was he living up to the values he now championed? One afternoon, as Sundar sat in his office, reflecting on the changes he had initiated, he was interrupted by a message from one of his close colleagues, Raj, a senior engineer at Google who had been with the company for almost as long as Sundar. Raj had always been a bit of a quiet force, someone who wasn't quick to speak up, but whose insights were always deeply thoughtful. He wanted to meet Sundar in person to discuss something important. Sundar agreed, and they met in one of the quieter conference rooms at the headquarters. Raj wasted no time in getting to the point. "Sundar," he said, "I've been thinking a lot about the changes you've made here, about the emphasis on empathy, on listening to people, on embracing failure. It's all great, really. But there's one thing I think we're overlooking." Sundar leaned forward, eager to hear Raj's perspective. "What's that?" he asked. Raj paused for a moment before speaking again. "We've focused so much on changing the culture, on making sure that everyone feels heard and empowered, that we've forgotten to ask something fundamental. Are we still keeping the bar high enough? Are we still pushing ourselves to be the best in the world? I'm all for creating a positive, collaborative environment, but we can't lose sight of what makes Google great, the relentless pursuit of excellence." Sundar sat back, absorbing Raj's words. He had always believed in the power of empathy, of creating a company culture that valued the individual. But Raj's point was valid. Google's success had always been built on pushing the boundaries of what was possible, on striving for excellence in everything they did. And that didn't mean they had to abandon empathy or connection. It meant they had to find a balance. Over the next few weeks, Sundar worked closely with Raj and other senior leaders to refine the company's vision. They focused on creating an environment where innovation and excellence went hand in hand with empathy and human connection. They redefined what it meant to strive for greatness, not just in terms of technological achievements, but also in terms of how they treated each other as people. Sundar knew that this was the key to sustaining Google's leadership in the tech world, not just today, but for years to come. As Sundar looked out over the Google campus that evening, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had come full circle, from the young engineer who once dreamed of changing the world, to the CEO who had learned that true leadership was about creating a culture where people felt valued, heard, and empowered. It wasn't just about building products or making profits. It was about building a legacy that would inspire future generations to do more than just work. It was about encouraging them to be part of something bigger than themselves, to see their work as a way to make the world a better place. The ripple effect of leadership, the winds of change were undeniable within Google's vast network. It had started as a subtle shift, a quiet but significant realignment of values. Now, as Sundar Pichai moved deeper into his role as the CEO, the impact of his decisions became even more apparent. He could sense it in the energy that pulsed through the hallways of Google, in the way teams approached challenges, and in the conversations that spilled over from formal meetings into impromptu gatherings. Employees no longer seemed to hesitate when it came to sharing their ideas. They no longer feared rejection. They no longer felt as if their voices were just whispers in the wind, destined to be lost. Instead, they were now confident in their own right, able to contribute freely to the company's overarching mission without the weight of hierarchy hanging over them. Sundar, however, was aware that a company as large as Google didn't just evolve overnight. Culture, once firmly established, was slow to change. But he felt an invigorating shift among the employees, something that was more than just surface-level enthusiasm. They were rediscovering their own sense of purpose, driven by more than just the work they did. There was a renewed sense of ownership and responsibility toward the company's goals and its social impact. And for Sundar, this was a testament to the power of his vision, but it was also a reminder of the profound effect that true leadership grounded in empathy, transparency, and vulnerability, could have on an organization. In the midst of this transformation, Sundar found himself balancing his focus on maintaining Google's competitive edge in the tech industry with his desire to cultivate an environment where people truly thrived. It was a delicate dance between nurturing innovation and creating space for personal growth. One of the key lessons Sundar had internalized over the past few months was the importance of flexibility, understanding that the path to success was not linear. Success could be achieved through many different avenues, and often the most creative solutions arose when employees felt free to take risks, even if those risks didn't always lead to immediate success. Google had always been a company where experimentation was key to growth, but Sundar knew that in order to sustain the company's edge, they needed to continue to push boundaries, not just technologically but culturally as well. It became clear to Sundar that leadership wasn't about having all the answers. It was about setting the stage for others to find their own answers, empowering them to do so. He realized that the best way to lead wasn't by micromanaging every detail, but by fostering an environment where employees felt motivated and equipped to solve problems independently. He started devoting more time to mentorship, not just within the leadership team but across the entire organization. Sundar began hosting fireside chats with employees at all levels, sharing his own experiences, struggles, and growth. It was a way for him to bridge the gap between the executive team and the rest of the company, to show that no one was too far removed from the day-to-day challenges that defined the heart of Google. One particular session stood out in Sundar's memory. It was a gathering of young engineers, recent graduates who had joined the company with dreams of working on the cutting-edge technologies that would shape the future. They were bright, eager, and incredibly passionate about their work. Sundar had always enjoyed meeting with younger employees because they brought with them a refreshing sense of enthusiasm, but this particular session struck a chord with him. The group was discussing the challenges they faced in building a new AI product aimed at improving user experience for underserved communities. As they spoke, it became clear that they weren't just concerned about the technicalities of the product. They were concerned with its ethical implications, its impact on real lives, and its long-term sustainability. Listening to them, Sundar was reminded of his own early days at Google, the same passion for doing something meaningful, for making a difference, that had driven him to pursue technology in the first place. It was a humbling reminder of the incredible talent that surrounded him, and he realized that the responsibility of leadership was not just to direct, but to nurture these minds, to give them the freedom to explore ideas and possibilities that could transform the world. It was no longer just about creating the best products or services. It was about creating products that had a purpose, products that solved real problems and made lives better. As Sundar reflected on the session, he made a mental note to shift the focus of some of the company's efforts towards these young, innovative teams. The work they were doing felt like the perfect marriage of technology and empathy, something that aligned perfectly with the core values he had come to champion. He knew that empowering these teams to explore new solutions in a way that prioritized human connection and social responsibility would be a key part of Google's future success. Soon after this meeting, Sundar put together a new initiative designed to foster collaboration between different teams across the company. Dubbed Ideas Without Borders, the program aimed to encourage interdisciplinary partnerships that brought together employees from diverse backgrounds and skill sets to solve complex problems. The idea was simple. Creativity and innovation thrived when people with different perspectives came together to challenge each other's assumptions, to break down the walls between departments, and to think outside the box. It was also a way for Sundar to ensure that the values of empathy and collaboration were woven into the very fabric of Google's operations. The response to Ideas Without Borders exceeded Sundar's expectations. Employees, energized by the chance to work on projects that spanned multiple disciplines and involved people from all levels of the organization, dove in with enthusiasm. They began tackling problems that had long been considered insurmountable, from improving accessibility for disabled users to reducing the environmental impact of Google's data centers. The sense of excitement and possibility was palpable across the company as teams collaborated in new and creative ways, often breaking down traditional boundaries in the process. Sundar watched with pride as ideas that had once seemed far-fetched began to take shape. He knew that this was the future of innovation, an environment where people were empowered to take risks, collaborate freely, and put human-centered design at the heart of every decision. While these changes were starting to take root within the company, Sundar couldn't ignore the broader impact of Google's actions on the world. He had always known that the company had a responsibility to use its resources to benefit society. But now, more than ever, Sundar felt an intense sense of urgency to ensure that Google was contributing positively to the world. He began working with external partners, nonprofits, and governments to explore ways in which Google's technologies could be used to address some of the world's most pressing issues: climate change, access to education, public health, and economic inequality. Sundar's vision for Google was no longer just about revolutionizing the tech industry. It was about revolutionizing the way technology could be used as a force for good. He wanted to ensure that the company was contributing to a better world, not just through its products and services, but through the way it operated and interacted with the world at large. One of the key areas of focus for Sundar was Google's commitment to sustainability. He had long believed that the tech industry had a responsibility to lead by example when it came to environmental stewardship. Under his leadership, Google had committed to running its data centers entirely on renewable energy, a bold move that set a new standard for the industry. But Sundar knew that this was just the beginning. He began pushing for even more ambitious sustainability goals, from reducing the carbon footprint of Google's supply chain to investing in green technologies that could help mitigate the effects of climate change. It was an initiative that required buy-in from every part of the company, but Sundar was confident that by working together, Google could make a meaningful impact on the planet's future. Sundar understood that leadership, in the truest sense, was about more than just achieving business success. It was about creating an environment where people could thrive, where innovation and empathy worked hand in hand to create a better future for all. The journey that had begun with a simple act of disguise had led him to a profound realization. True leadership was about empowering others, listening deeply, and using technology as a tool to improve lives. And as Sundar looked to the future, he felt an overwhelming sense of purpose. He knew that Google, under his leadership, was on a path that would continue to push the boundaries of what technology could achieve, and in doing so, it would help create a world where people could truly connect, collaborate, and change the world for the better. Beyond the horizon, Sundar Pichai had always been a visionary, but the nature of his vision had evolved over time. What once began as a personal ambition to revolutionize the way people interacted with technology had grown into something far greater, a mission to impact the world in a way that went beyond mere profit margins and product launches. It was clear that the journey he had embarked upon, both personally and professionally, was no longer just about steering Google to new heights of technological achievement. It had become about using that technology for a higher purpose, about leveraging the power of innovation to tackle some of the world's most pressing problems. In the wake of his commitment to cultural transformation within Google, Sundar began to explore how the company could shift its global impact in a more socially responsible direction. He realized that the true power of technology did not lie in its ability to simply create new products or features. It lay in its capacity to address systemic challenges that had long plagued society. As Sundar met with teams across the company, he was consistently struck by the incredible potential of Google's tools and infrastructure to address large-scale issues such as climate change, healthcare accessibility, poverty, and education. With this realization came a new challenge. While Google was undoubtedly a leader in technology, its influence had not yet reached the level of global impact that Sundar envisioned. He had already taken steps within the company to cultivate a more empathetic, people-centered approach to innovation. But now it was time to expand that vision and make a broader societal impact. For Sundar, this wasn't just about philanthropy or corporate social responsibility. It was about embedding these ideals into the very core of Google's business practices, from product design to partnerships, to the way the company interacted with global challenges. One of Sundar's first major initiatives aimed at global impact was the launch of the Google for Good program, a strategic initiative designed to direct Google's resources towards solving humanitarian crises and driving social change. The initiative sought to harness the power of artificial intelligence, data analytics, and the global reach of Google's platform to address issues such as disaster relief, climate change, and public health. The program was ambitious. Some even called it overly ambitious. But Sundar knew that the company had the potential to do far more than simply create products that made people's lives easier. They had the ability to influence change on a grand scale, to reshape industries, and to inspire other tech giants to follow suit. The first major project under the Google for Good banner was focused on using AI to aid in disaster response. Google had already been using AI to enhance its products for years, but Sundar wanted to see it used in a way that could save lives. Working with humanitarian organizations and local governments, Google's AI team developed a machine learning model capable of predicting the paths of natural disasters with incredible accuracy. This AI-powered tool allowed responders to anticipate the areas that would be hardest hit by events like hurricanes, earthquakes, and wildfires, giving relief organizations valuable time to prepare and respond. The tool also provided real-time data on the impact of these disasters, allowing for faster resource distribution and better allocation of aid. As Sundar watched the project unfold, he realized that it was one of the most significant moments in his career. It wasn't just about the technology, though the AI itself was groundbreaking. It was about the people it was helping. The initiative had the potential to save thousands of lives and to provide relief to millions in need. The sense of pride that came with seeing this project take off filled Sundar with a renewed sense of purpose. This was the kind of work that could define Google's legacy, not just in terms of technological breakthroughs, but in the impact the company had on the world. But Sundar knew that the path to truly meaningful change would require much more than just a few groundbreaking initiatives. It would require a shift in the entire approach that the tech industry took toward innovation. He understood that technology had the potential to transform the world for the better, but it had to be done thoughtfully and intentionally. The impact of Google's work couldn't simply be measured by profits or the number of users it served. It had to be measured by the change it created in the world. Sundar began to see that the way forward for Google was not just about being the biggest or most successful tech company. It was about being the most responsible, the most ethically driven, and the most committed to making the world a better place. In order to make this vision a reality, Sundar knew that Google would need to reevaluate its partnerships and collaborations with other organizations. He began working closely with governments, nonprofits, and other tech companies to foster collaborations that were not just about mutual benefit, but about solving real-world problems together. Sundar's approach was rooted in the belief that, when it came to addressing global challenges, collaboration was the key. The problems were simply too large for any one company, or even one country, to solve alone. The more Sundar explored these partnerships, the more he realized that the true power of technology lay in the connections it could create, not just between people, but between organizations and nations working toward the same goal. It was during one of these collaborative efforts that Sundar met with a group of leaders from the United Nations who were working on global sustainability initiatives. Google had been a major player in the push for renewable energy within the tech industry, but Sundar knew that sustainability required much more than just green data centers and energy-efficient algorithms. It required global coordination, changes in public policy, and a deep commitment from all sectors of society. Sundar was eager to learn from the experts and to see how Google could contribute in more meaningful ways. During the meeting, the conversation turned to the role of artificial intelligence in addressing climate change. Could AI help reduce carbon emissions? Could it be used to track the environmental impact of industries? The discussion left Sundar both inspired and overwhelmed by the scale of the task. But he also knew that, with Google's resources and expertise, they had a unique opportunity to make a real difference. In the months that followed, Sundar worked tirelessly with the team to bring these ideas to life. Google launched several new projects aimed at accelerating the adoption of clean energy technologies, including partnerships with renewable energy companies to use AI for optimizing energy usage and distribution. Google's cloud platform became a key enabler for businesses around the world to shift to more sustainable practices by providing them with powerful tools to track and reduce their carbon footprints. Sundar had come to realize that the future of the planet depended on technology, but more importantly, it depended on the responsible use of that technology to solve real problems. He knew that these were not easy tasks, and the challenges ahead would require both patience and perseverance. But Sundar believed deeply in the power of human ingenuity, and the power of his company's innovations to create a positive impact. As Google continued its efforts in these global initiatives, Sundar took a step back and reflected on just how far the company had come. It was no longer just a technology company. It had become a force for good in the world. The work that Sundar had done in fostering a culture of empathy and collaboration, combined with his commitment to using technology for social impact, had set Google on a path toward greater purpose. It was clear to him now that the true value of innovation lay not in the products it created, but in the lives it could change and the problems it could solve. Looking ahead, Sundar saw an exciting future for Google, a future where the company wasn't simply leading the tech industry, but where it was using its resources to address the most critical challenges of the 21st century. The future wasn't just about technology for technology's sake. It was about technology that served humanity, that brought people together, that solved the problems that mattered most. As he gazed out from his office at the Googleplex, Sundar felt a deep sense of pride in how far the company had come and a renewed sense of purpose in the work still to be done. The legacy of leadership. As Sundar Pichai looked at the transformation that had taken place at Google, he felt a profound sense of pride. His journey had not only been one of personal growth, but also a testament to the power of leadership that was rooted in humility, empathy, and the belief that technology could be a force for good. The path had not been an easy one, and there were moments along the way when the weight of his decisions felt overwhelming. But as he reflected on the people he had met, the projects they had brought to life, and the global impact they were beginning to make, Sundar understood that the work he had set out to do was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Sundar's leadership had shaped Google into a company that was not only an innovation powerhouse, but also a place where individuals felt valued, empowered, and driven by a shared sense of purpose. The changes he had instituted within the company, emphasizing collaboration, empathy, and the importance of innovation with integrity, had begun to ripple through every layer of the organization. No longer was Google simply a company that created cutting-edge technologies. It was a company that fostered a culture of growth, kindness, and accountability. One where employees felt they were not just part of a corporate machine, but part of something greater, something that mattered on a global scale. This cultural shift had not only revitalized Google internally but had also started to make an impact beyond its walls. Google's initiatives, such as Google for Good, were actively addressing some of the world's most pressing issues. The disaster response AI that Sundar had championed was saving lives in the wake of natural disasters, and the partnerships that had been formed with organizations focused on sustainability were making strides toward reducing global carbon emissions. Google was becoming a model for how technology, when used responsibly, could be harnessed to solve real-world problems. Sundar felt an overwhelming sense of purpose in this work, as if he were part of a much larger movement, one that would redefine the role of corporations in society. But beyond the tangible outcomes, what Sundar was most proud of was the people of Google. The engineers who dreamed of a better world, the designers who sought to make technology accessible to all, the product managers who worked tirelessly to ensure that every project was aligned with Google's core values. They were the heart and soul of Google's transformation. Sundar understood now that true leadership wasn't about having all the answers or making the right decisions all the time. It was about creating an environment where the people around you were empowered to think boldly, to challenge the status quo, and to pursue solutions that could change the world. This was the legacy that Sundar hoped to leave behind, one where leadership was defined by empowerment, where the company's success was measured not just in terms of profit, but in the positive impact it had on society. However, Sundar was keenly aware that Google was still on a journey, one that would continue to evolve and adapt in the face of new challenges and opportunities. Technology was advancing at an unprecedented rate, and with it, the potential for both innovation and disruption. Sundar knew that Google had a responsibility to remain at the forefront of technological advancements, but it also had a responsibility to do so in a way that was ethical, transparent, and aligned with the values that had come to define the company. As the world became more interconnected, it was clear that the challenges would only grow more complex. From the ethical considerations surrounding artificial intelligence to the need for data privacy and security in an increasingly digital world, Sundar understood that the path forward would require vigilance, adaptability, and a commitment to integrity. Sundar's leadership style had always been one of humility, but it was also one that recognized the need for change and growth. He had learned that leadership wasn't static. It was an evolving process of self-reflection, learning from others, and adapting to the needs of the times. In his early days at Google, Sundar had often felt like an outsider, an engineer trying to navigate the vast complexities of a rapidly growing company. But over the years, he had come to understand that true leadership came not from being at the top, but from understanding the pulse of the organization, from listening to the voices of the employees who were building the future. Leadership, in his view, was about creating the conditions for others to thrive, to contribute, and to bring their unique perspectives to the table. And as Sundar looked toward the future, he began to realize that his role was not just to lead Google in its present form, but to shape the future of technology and its role in society. The challenges that lay ahead, such as bridging the digital divide, ensuring that technology benefited all people, and tackling the existential threats posed by climate change, were monumental. But Sundar was no longer intimidated by these challenges. He understood that the strength of Google lay not just in its technology, but in its people, and in their ability to come together to solve even the most daunting problems. In a speech at the World Economic Forum, Sundar articulated this vision for the future. He spoke about the incredible potential of technology to drive progress in areas like healthcare, education, and sustainable development. He talked about the need for global cooperation to ensure that the benefits of technology were distributed equitably, and he emphasized the importance of building trust with users by prioritizing privacy, security, and transparency. His words resonated deeply with leaders from around the world, who were increasingly grappling with the same challenges. Sundar's message was clear. Technology should not just be a tool for economic growth, but a tool for social good.